When Andre rescued an abandoned puppy, he could have never predicted that only a few months later he would find out that it wasn't a dog at all. In order to keep it, he would have to uproot his entire life. Andre Musenko was loading his shopping bags into his vehicle when something on the truck next to him caught his eye. On the back, there was a small cage with a tiny puppy inside it. The dog looked so sad and depressed that he touched Andre's heart straight away. But the pup was also beautiful. It had the fluffiest coat he'd ever seen and a pair of sweet eyes he immediately fell in love with. When the owner of the truck came back, Andre stuck around to speak to him about the puppy and asked where he got it. But what the man had to say was not good. The dog had been abandoned close to his farm, he explained. He and his farmhands kept chasing him off, but it refused to leave. A large road went right past their farm, and they often got unwanted animals that people didn't want dropped off there. They couldn't keep all of them, but they still tried to find them nice homes. However, this poor little puppy had made the farmer angry. He must have been hungry, as he didn't have a family to care for him. To be fair, he looked like he should have still been drinking milk from his mum. The puppy had followed his nose in search of food and had found himself inside the chicken coop. He had destroyed a bunch of chickens, and some others had also perished because of the shock of the invasion. The poor farmer didn't have a lot of resources, and the loss was devastating. He wanted the pup gone, but he couldn't get it over his heart to do it himself. Instead, he had decided to take him to the vet and ask if they could euthanize the dog for cheap. This brought tears to Andre's eyes. He could not allow the puppy to be put down just because he was alone and hungry. He was just doing what came naturally to animals, which was trying to survive. He had to do something, so he offered to take the pup off the man's hands. He was even willing to pay for him so that the farmer could replace some of his animals. In exchange, he would gain a gorgeous puppy and some much-needed company. It was a win-win situation. The man agreed, as long as he never saw the dog on his land again. Andre held the pup close, and his whole body relaxed. The sweet boy must have been so scared, and he was grateful that he had come around just in time to save him. Now he only had to figure out what he was going to do with a puppy he had not planned on getting. At that moment he was living in an apartment without a garden, but eventually he managed to free enough room in his house for the pup to play in. He called dog Akila, and the two of them developed an instant bond. Andre wasn't sure if it was because Akila knew that he had saved him, or if they just had a connection that went beyond anything he had ever experienced. But either way, he had never known that a dog could really become his best friend. They had a lot of fun together, but Andre also had to make sure that Akila got enough exercise, or he could get frustrated and even slightly destructive. He loved to steal his humans' hats and hoodies, but he was never gentle with them. The hats he would chew, the hoodies he would just lie on and nap. As energetic and playful as Akila was, Andre expected he would be hard to train and control when going on walks. But the puppy was surprisingly relaxed and obedient. He was content to work at Andre's pace and explored the forests around them. That is, until he saw other dogs. Then he would absolutely lose his mind. He wanted to play with every dog that he encountered, even the ones that had no interest in becoming his friends. It was really sweet to see, and people would always compliment Andre on his puppy's demeanor. Akila was a special dog with many talents. But there was one little problem that was hard to handle. He would simply not stop growing. As time went by, he became massive. His black coat became even fluffier, and he grew into a beautiful adult dog. Most people were scared of him, and their reactions pushed Andre to wonder about the dog's large size. He tried to convince himself that it was normal for a wolf dog, but even he had to admit that he was a little worried. What if the dog had some sort of hormone imbalance that was causing him to grow like this? He was scared of what he would hear from the vet, but he had to find out what was going on with his best friend. He hoped all was well and that the dog was just really large. But that was not what the doctor told him. He went to the vet's office and took Akila inside with him. The nurse gave one look at the animal and let out a little scream. They asked him to move to another room, convinced that Akila would injure another animal or even the humans that were around them. Andre knew better, but he didn't argue. At this stage, Akila was only a few months old, but he was already larger than most massive breed dogs. It was interesting to go on walks and see people's reactions when he wanted to make friends with small breed dogs. Andre had to admit that he had some suspicions that Akila wasn't entirely what he thought he was. He had been convinced that his puppy was the product of two purebred wolf dogs, but months later he was going to find out that his sweet companion wasn't a dog at all. The vet laughed when he entered and saw Akila sitting behind Andre with his giant head on his shoulder. The large boy just loved his human, that was for sure. But everything would change in those next few moments. The good news was that Akila was incredibly healthy and there was nothing wrong with him at all. The other news was that the dog was a wolf. To be specific, a full Canadian black wolf with no dogs in his family tree. Why and how he had ended up abandoned next to the farmer's land was a mystery. His pack could have left him behind for some reason, or someone could have tried to take the wolf pup home only to realize their mistake halfway. Either way, his paths had crossed with Andre's, who had been raising him as his sweet puppy for months. To say he was shocked was a euphemism. Akila had never shown signs of aggression, and aside from preferring meat to kibble, he had never suspected that he wasn't a normal dog. Domesticated as he was, there was no way that he would ever be able to survive in the wild if Andre set him free now. At the same time, he couldn't keep treating the wolf in the exact same way as he would have a dog. It wasn't entirely bad news, but it would change their lives. The vet informed Andre that he had to contact the local wildlife authority, and he wasn't sure what they would decide to do with this situation. Andre lived in the city in a residential house. It wasn't entirely appropriate accommodation for any wolf, and even less for one of Akila's size. He was living in someone's backyard, walking among people and playing with pets and children several times smaller than him. Andre had to make some changes in his lifestyle if he wanted to keep his best friend with him. Now, a few days later, a local wildlife inspector came out to see them. He would be the one to decide whether to confiscate the wolf or to allow Andre to keep him. As soon as he saw them together, he could not deny the amazing bond that the man and the wolf shared, and he decided that he didn't want to break that up if he could help them stay together. The first thing was to get the wolf out of the city limits. Having a wild animal like that in a town was not okay. Andre sold his place, took all of his assets and savings, and bought a small plot of land that was much more appropriate for raising a wolf. The inspector had never come across a situation like that, so he was also just trying his best to navigate things. Most laws in Russia were against normal people raising wild animals, and he explained that Andre would have to do his very best to keep the wolf in his care. Most people just give up, but Andre loved that wolf like he was his child and would do anything to keep him. Just picturing Akila going to a shelter or another home and never getting his head scratches again made his blood freeze. It would have been heartbreaking for the wolf, who loved this human too much for them to be separated, but also for Andre himself. The land gave Akila a lot of chances to run around and play, but he needed an enclosure that would keep people around him safe. Andre had to get everything ready and up to standard because there was one huge obstacle that he had to overcome before he could relax. He had to be registered as an animal rescue expert to be able to keep the wild animal, and in order to do so, he had to demonstrate he had everything a wild animal could need. So much had changed in a very short while, and Andre wanted to share it with all his friends and family over social media. He started with videos of his little puppy and the big boy he had become, and slowly eased his public into the news. People were astounded when they found out that Akila was a wolf, but it was the bond between man and beast that really shocked everyone. It was incredible to see just how close they were. The wolf acted like a playful puppy, trying to nibble on Andre's ears and the hood of his hoodie. But despite his considerable size and pointy canines, he didn't hurt him at all. He was very playful, but the moment Andre told him off, he would relax. It was amazing to see, but unfortunately the social media posts had a few unplanned side effects. His story went viral in no time as his family shared the cute videos on their own channels, and everything went crazy from there. Some people believed he had made a huge mistake in adopting an animal from a random farmer. Others wanted to know how come he had never suspected Akila might not be a dog. Some thought that he was doing him a disservice by keeping him with him. But thankfully most comments came from open-minded people who understood he only had Akila's best interests in mind. These people were invested in the handsome man and his stunning wolf. They wanted to see what the two were up to day after day after day, and his following grew massively in the space of a few weeks. But Andre didn't care about all of that. He had to focus on getting the place ready for his inspection. He spent all his money on making the enclosure ready for the wolf to sleep in, budgeting the things that were most important. Unfortunately, the inspector did not think that the enclosure was the best place for him. According to him, Akila needed a lot more room to be comfortable. Andre was planning on letting him out all the time to take long walks and play, just like he always did. But for the inspector, that didn't matter. He needed to have his parameters met, and there was no room for discussion. It was all or nothing. He warned Andre that he only had a few weeks left to get the changes made, or they would have to take Akila away. The inspector was sad because he could see the bond between the two of them, but there was nothing he could do. The animal needed to have all his needs met, or he couldn't license Andre as a shelter. In reality, he should have taken the wolf then and there, but he was rooting for them and hoped that they could get it done. His warning was a lifeline, but it did not feel that way to Andre. To him, it felt like the end of the world. He had no chance of ever getting everything done. He had spent all his savings on buying the property and getting it to the point that it was at. At that stage, he was still working his day job in the city, but that would never be enough for all the upgrades he had to make. He had to make peace with the fact that he was going to have to say goodbye to Akila. He wanted to make it as easy on the wolf as possible, so he started to have less contact with him. But that just broke both of their hearts. Akila got depressed because his friend wasn't playing with him anymore, and Andre didn't know what to do. The wolf was simply too attached to him. Was he even going to survive if they took him from the only family he had ever known? He didn't know, and he was getting sick from thinking about everything bad that could happen. However, something incredible happened and changed everything. One of his friends commented on one of his posts, telling everyone about the hardship he was facing, and people came together to help him out. Everyone wanted to know where they could contribute to getting things built as they should be, and faster than Andre could ever imagine. He had enough money to get everything changed as he needed it to be. He later found out that even the inspector had contributed to the cause. When he got back to the farm to check on his progress, he was incredibly happy to see that everything was up to code. He had never been happier to give someone the good news. Andre was going to be able to keep his wolf for the rest of his life. The young man rejoiced, and his online supporters cheered with him. Once again, Andre made sure to spend a lot of time with Akila and build trust between them. It was a lot less stressful to know that he had all the right paperwork to care for his buddy, and he could finally focus on the proper training. But he wasn't going to stop there. It was great that he could give Akila a home, but if anything, his relationship with the wolf had only inspired him to do more. There were still a bunch of other animals that needed help too, and Andre now had the right to give them a good home. He just needed the resources to do so. Seeing how invested people were in Akila helped solidify the knowledge that many people want to help animals, but they don't always have the skills or the time to do so. But they are still willing to help others that can. So Andre started making some Akila gear and selling merch online. He also had many people who wanted to contribute to the wolf and other animals' care, and he gratefully accepted their offers. But that wasn't all. People knew about his natural talents with animals, and that meant that each time they heard about wolves or wolf hybrids that needed help, he would be the first call. Andre couldn't say no to any animal in need. The added bonus was that Akila got to make friends that he could play with, not quite friends of his own size, since most wolves were smaller than him, but at least ones that could play with him without getting hurt. But he didn't need to stick with wolves either. Any animal that needed help would be taken care of at his sanctuary. For example, most recently, he posted videos of the newest additions to the family, a few wild boars that love belly rubs. The man has an incredible talent for bonding with all sorts of animals. The day he found that little puppy in a small crate on the back of the guy's truck was also the day he found his true calling. He has changed so many lives so far, and he doesn't seem to have any plans to stop. His big dream is to create large homes for all the animals in his care, starting with Akila. That is what he is saving for right now. He wants to give the wolf the chance to live as close to the wild as he can, but within the safety of the sanctuary. As a massive animal that loves head scratches, he will never be able to live on his own, but Andre hopes to give him the next best thing someday. But until he can make that happen, he still puts all of his heart and soul into giving the animals in his care the love they deserve. Their life might have changed drastically from the time that they lived in the city when they thought that Akila was a dog, but man and animal still remain devoted to each other, and that is one thing that will never change. What a beautiful story. Would you have kept Akila after discovering his true heritage? Would you leave your whole life behind to open a sanctuary for wild animals? Tell us in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and join us again for more incredible stories.